Right. Can you all see and hear us? Excellent. It is March 6th at 5:01, and this is the Personnel and Ordinance Committee meeting. We have all trustees present, as well as myself, Bevan Harris, and a couple members of our Wildlife Coalition present. I just wanted to ask if we could change the order of the agenda items, since we do have people in person to discuss the Wildlife Coalition's. And be okay with that.
Yeah.
Great. Excellent. So I did not have time to review the wildlife ordinance memo that was in our board packet before it went out. I should have given them a earlier date, so I had time to review it, but that's okay. I think this will just, tonight, I would suggest having the members of the Wildlife Coalition present their idea for an ordinance, and then staff can get feedback from the trustees on details such as trash, harassment, fines, and then staff will then present a draft ordinance at the next P&O committee if that is the desire of the committee.
Great.
So I will kick it off to either Kelly or Wes to go over the wildlife ordinance, or just your progress thus far in the coalition.
Could I make a quick comment, and then Kelly has her, I don't have my head in front of me, so that's it up to her. So Evan Harris had kind of spearheaded this. She will be here very shortly. I think
Okay.
she worked at the library till 5, so how long it takes to navigate the snow here.
Oh.
You know, the coalition, one of the concerns, of course, that came up was because in particular of the bears that were in town and the mother bear that was killed, arguably because of trash that was available that was bringing in, and then potentially some, harassment and things like that. And of course, I'll note that the laws or whatever in the state per CPW in terms of harassing wildlife, it is illegal to harass wildlife, but the enforcement is pretty weak. So it's like a maximum of $100. I think, to bring a case or whatever is a really high bar or whatever. And then I think there's potentially some strikes against like a hunting license if you're a hunter or whatever. But it's pretty weak. So the idea was like, should the town of Silverton do something to try to, pass an ordinance that would put a little more teeth to try to minimize or ideally eliminate some of the issues with not just bears, but other wildlife that we commonly get in town. And then other elements of the Wildlife Coalition is pursuing is to try to, make, town trash cans and stuff more bear proof, and try to pursue a CPW grant for trash, things like that. And then also an educational component. So I would suggest, at least from my opinion, that the thing is, it's like, well, what should be in an ordinance and what penalties and stuff would be there versus what should be more, targeted with education. That's going to be a question to discuss. But anyway, Kelly, you could talk a little bit about what you came up with.
Well, I did a bunch of research when we started talking about this, and I went online and I found one other city that's got a really good ordinance, which is Steamboat Springs. And their fines, what they were saying, first violation is $250, second is $500, and then the third is $999. So. You said, yeah, have some teeth in it and be able to put some weight behind it if people don't respond and listen to what we put out there, keeping the lid shut, keeping the oil pick laying around out there. Another thing I had mentioned, but I noticed that it didn't end up in here about bird feeders. In Steamboat, they don't allow them between April 15th and November 15th because it's an attractant for bears and other wildlife that bring them into your yards and stuff.
Is that between November and April?
April 15th and November 15th
Between April and November?
Summer.
in the summer.
Okay.
Because even like, the art shop that's right across the street from my business, she had a hummingbird feeder out and it came through and just knocked it down.
Right.
So she quit putting it out because of that.
Do they have no bird feeders at all? Because does it have to be on a suspended cable or device? Because I saw that in quite a lot of ordinances around.
I think
I was
that's
gonna
why
bring
we
up-
didn't put it in there of just like a blanket none, because I wasn't sure. I don't know if you had thoughts about if there was like parameters around them or just not, or if it'd be hard to.
They said between April 15th, November 15th, or they must be removed or on a suspended cable where the bears can't get at them. So like, if you do have them further out in the yard, not up against your house where they can get at them easily.
Right. Because, I mean, as you're aware, there's a lot of people that do have like hummingbird feeders and those dates, it's like, that's when hummingbirds are around, right? And so I think for me personally, it's like, that's one of the areas where, you know, it's like that ordinance versus education or some of each. You know, I guess one of the things that I'll admit, I mean, obviously I'm a wildlife advocate. I'm a wildlife photographer. I think everybody knows that. But I also am sensitive to sometimes conservation groups or whatever to become, if you go too far, you risk alienated people that would be on your side. So if you're trying to get, you know, a lot of people in town to support it, I think you need to be a little thoughtful in terms of reasonable approaches.
Yeah.
Is my personal opinion. I'm just speaking for myself.
Yeah, I was gonna mention the bird feeders too. I saw it in the ordinance for Vale and Estes Park as well. It's in there to know.
It can be an issue, absolutely.
Or like just this, like I want them permitted. I was permitted, but on the,
Right. How do you
Like
do
far
you do
enough
that?
away.
right,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that's been less of an issue for us, but that's certainly a valid
Right.
request. I don't think we ban them. I think it's just people need to know that they need to be out of reach.
Do you mind if we just zoom out for a minute? Evan, we were kind of waiting on you because for your memo, and maybe you could walk us through it a little bit. Kind of where, Wes gave a background of what the Wildlife Coalition has been doing, and, maybe you could help us walk through the memo real quick so that we zoom out real big and then we can kind of dive into those details.
Yeah, just like it being kind of the memo like that I sent. Yeah. Yeah, it just being like a place to start so that we can have a better option to bring, but whatever input you all have, then like add that in, or like how I've never written an ordinance or anything. So it was like, you know, looking at some other towns. And I think like the top two things that we talked about in the last meeting were like trash was huge. And so that's there. And then like how to enforce it and how to report things. So those are kind of, I feel like the main things in there. And then harassment of wildlife. So we just,
Intentional feeding things.
yeah. And I noticed too that actually like so specifically about, you know, the educational aspects that like on Breckenridge's website that also has like probably a comparable bear issue that Durango has. And Durango has the same thing that there's like, here's these ordinances mainly about trash, harassing wildlife. And then also it's like, and here are things that attract wildlife, specifically bears, and how to mitigate that, and like basically like a whole education page with their ordinance that talks about living in bear country, living with wildlife. So that was just something I noticed while looking at.
Yeah, Steamboat has the same thing in theirs too.
Yeah.
Was Steamboat the biggest one that this was modeled after in your other places in Colorado? Have you
Breckenridge, Durango, Steamboat. I think.
Dale.
Vail's a good one, I think.
Yeah, and just kind of looking at what their specific ordinances were, and a lot of times it revolves around trash and harassing and feeding animals. That's what I noticed.
And after last year, I tried to treat it with a carrot, not a stick, but this year it's gonna be a stick right off the bat. I'm gonna let people know they're gonna get a $300 gift every time we're having a conversation. So
But we would need a ordinance to back that up.
sure, when that comes.
Yeah, I definitely think an ordinance is necessary, especially looking at some of these wildlife protection orders, which was adopted in 2006 and some other ones in 2015, 14. It's great to have some local power in this. I guess I'm wondering, through the process, have y'all chatted at all with the sheriff's department to get their input? I guess I'm just wondering about enforcement. Will it just be town and Bevan, or will it be like a partnership with the sheriff department as well?
We really haven't spoke with the sheriff. We talked with CPW
Okay.
a lot.
Yeah, and Bruce was there at like that first meeting. And there was like conversation around that, CPW needs to be informed if there is a bear in town, so they can like keep track if it keeps coming back. And then also that, and this would be something to talk to them about, is like, and I think I put it in there, but with not a lot of clarity about reporting, of like, okay, do we call CPW first to let them know, especially if it's not like a danger, like a violent or aggressive, that's the word, like aggressive, or an animal that's acting strangely. Like if you're in immediate danger, I would say, yeah, probably call the sheriff's department first. But if it's like, there's a bear over there, do we call CPW first? And then let the sheriff's department know, so they're just aware. But I think code wise, that like code and the trash things would be,
I would like it to go through me, so I contact CPW.
yeah.
They've requested, they want to know.
The Sheriff's Department has to contact CPW as well, typically,
Right.
depending on.
Do you mean for trash things or for?
Well, now
Everything.
for all code enforcement and all issues, we now have a number that people can text right away. And then it gets disseminated out, and then we track all of those issues so that we can make sure that we're addressing things correctly, and that report will go back to the trustees. So
Right.
we kind of did this in response to, like, who do I contact for this, or who do I contact for that? And so we've created just one number. Unfortunately, it's not a really easy number. It's 970-903-3328. I don't know how to come up with a fun way for people to remember that, but it's one number that every issue can go into, and then it gets disseminated to the right department.
Okay.
On the educational side, as we do posters and things, we can put that in there.
So even just like an animal sighting would go to that person, then someone would then let CPW know?
That one probably, like an animal sighting, go ahead.
I would prefer that if it's an animal sighting, something that needs to get dealt with right away, because the texting is going to be delayed.
Yeah.
The animal sighting could go directly to me.
Oh,
I'm okay, like per your decision, but I'd at least want to be able to disseminate. But
But yeah, I think before we get into the details, I do want the trustees to discuss first of all, if we want to pursue the ordinance, and then give staff that kind of direction on and then we can talk about in the details. It's really easy to get into the details before we zoom out and think like. So I'd love to hear from Jim or from Carl on our wildlife ordinance and the work that the coalition.
Carl, you want me to go first?
Yeah, I don't have,
I think it's coming from your computer.
Mine?
You guys know, like, us just 1 second, we realized we can't hear you.
Oh.
What are you looking
Let's
for?
put you here. All right, let's try that.
How's that?
Much better.
Much better? Good. Um, I've read through it. I have it, printed it out. I think this is a two-parter. I think part of this is the enforcement aspect and the trash component, and then the other part is the actual wildlife. I have an interesting time with this because we are a community 150 years in the middle of the forest. We've been here, we've dealt with it for all these years, and we've been able to deal with this pretty well. However, I do understand that we need an educational component, and I think that's the most important, is the education side of this. We have a new generation of folks moving in that may not understand really where we are. Then there's the component with the trash and the enforcement. I have my summons here, $300 max fine from Bevan, for a trash can over at the railroad that was used, predominantly not for railroad garbage, but it was cleaned up and it was enforced, and keeping that communication with Bevan actually worked really well. I understand the desire for new and updated ordinances, but I also don't want to. When I read the component about the birds and the bird feeders, that's where I had to kind of pull back a little bit and say, what is this really about? What are we really trying to do here? And that's exactly what I told Gloria on the phone. I said, I was on board, and then I started reading about bird feeders, and I understand about bird feeders. But if we remove them during the times where birds actually feed, why even put a bird feeder out in the middle of the winter? Because the birds aren't there anyway. I think it's well thought out. I like it. And I think that there's a lot of discussion going forward about this.
Can I say?
That's my thought.
Carl?
Maybe Carl?
Yeah, I don't have too much to add. I think my general feeling is absolutely that education is the biggest priority. And I think that's one thing that's really excellent to see, just that there's this engagement, and to see people in our community really thinking through the problem and how we can communicate about it. I think that's super important. I'm not opposed to bringing a new ordinance, but I do think that the simpler, the better. I think that this should be something that we can reliably enforce, and maybe focused on the biggest problem area, which is trash.
Jim, I agree that I think it is like two things, and I think that's kind of with a not knowing how to write an
Yeah,
ordinance.
no, and it might also be a third thing, that educational component.
Oh, yeah, I mean, and the
Yeah.
educational part is huge. And also, like, we already do have an ordinance about trash. I think
Right.
that it probably does need to be updated a bit, since last summer, we can see that a problem will happen continuously. And it doesn't seem to be on top priority for people until maybe there's like something that affects them, as in like a consequence. And then also, I think the biggest thing too is it's not just like trying to get people in trouble or anything, but we do live in this place that has been here for a long time. However, the more it grows, the more people come here. And with climate change, bear season is getting shorter and shorter and shorter of when they can find food. And so they're coming to get trash, and that'll actually like extend how long they're in town. So like, I think, yeah, the garbage part, we already have an ordinance, but that could be better. And then we actually don't have an ordinance for, there's like an animal cruelty one, but it's not very specific about harassment. And
Mhm.
I just feel like that's kind of a gap in the system that a lot of towns have like, I mean, there's a reason we have an animal cruelty ordinance, and in a way that's expanding it just to include wildlife and these other things that we share the town with, share, you know, all the surrounding areas. So I do just feel strongly that it's important to have something about the, you know, how we treat wildlife. And then educate, I think education is huge too. Yeah.
Can
Well,
I,
just to reiterate, I am all about this discussion. I think this is a great
Yeah.
discussion to be had. I'm not poo-pooing it in any way. I just wanna make sure that we're not overlapping. If we have verbiage already on the books, then it's really a matter of enforcement and reporting. And from my personal experience, reporting and enforcement was really good. So I don't, so from that aspect, I don't know how we can do that better, but maybe there's room for improvement. I mean, and I mean this in all sincerity, working with Bevan, and I even called him, I said, come over here, see what I've done. I took photographs, we compared notes, and we got it all cleaned up and remediated within 24 hours, 48 hours. But it's having that connectivity and availability to communicate.
could I ask, I have a question actually very much related to that. Because I mean, I totally agree with you, and we are pursuing this. You don't see it much in here, whatever, a separate educational component in terms of getting some posters up, putting stuff on the town's website, visitors, you know, whatever. So we are working on that. That is absolutely a priority for the coalition. It's just not it's not really, you're not seeing that in the ordinance so much, but a lot of that will happen there. My question though is that no doubt there, with the educational and even with like, say, trash and not securing it, there is that component to educate businesses. Okay, we need you to do this. We need, you know, consider that or whatever. But my question for Bevan though, is because the sense I get is you also have, well, you have a variety of things. It's not simple, but you also have some people, whatever, they're like, oh, we've always had bears. We've always done it this way. I'm just gonna ignore it, you know, and they really don't, they don't really care. And it's, you know, so the question with an ordinance, and the question is like, in terms of enforcement, if you have somebody that, you know, you're repeatedly having to contact because bears are showing up, dumping over their dumpster and feeding and whatever and creating a problem. It's like, what can you currently do about that? And what do you wish you could do about it maybe?
Right. Well, in some cases, maybe it's possible to have a fence put in or a containment, you know, like that's completely enclosed.
But if they don't want to do anything, what can you do or what?
I can look for another ordinance that they're violating. The pots of grease or oil sitting out was, I could have pinned them on it being a safety hazard, like an open bucket of paint for a kid or a toddler, you know, or an animal that could have potentially fallen in it and drowned. So I can look at it in different ways and discuss it potentially with the sheriff. Because I have discussed violations with them to assess whether it's in my jurisdiction or theirs. Because I want to get that right. And so there are, you know, sometimes it's just informing people that they need to stay a certain distance away or, you know, contain their dog so that the dog's not impacting the situation with the wildlife. So
Right, which is more of an educational, which is important.
Part of it's educational. With someone who's resistant like that, in that case, I had two different violations to address them with in two different areas. So they were consistent in not necessarily disregarding, but trying to resist it as recognized as a problem. It's just, and again, it's educating them. Okay, maybe they don't smell the grease, but the bear can from far away. And they don't need to put the pot of grease outside in the public. They could put it on a shelf in their kitchen and let it cool down there. So that's what apparently they told me their reasoning was. So it's really finding an alternative solution or an option to achieve the same goal.
Yeah, it's like having people that have dogs that harass the wildlife. We do have a leash law.
That's exactly what I was gonna say.
You should have your dog on a leash, then they won't be harassing.
Well, and in this case, there was a moose out, and for whatever reason, the gentleman didn't know, he's not from here, but he didn't know that the dog was an issue. And I informed him that every fatality of a human in Colorado was because it involved a dog present. So he needed to get his dog on a leash or inside. And I'm a dog owner. I know this in the same way.
And I think there's also like the educational piece to do with the leash law as well, that, right, it would create a solution if dogs were on leash in town rather than, I know it's Silverton, people walk with their dogs off leash, they let their dogs free roam. But to me, I mean, with the leash law in place, that's kind of intentionally and knowingly allowing a dog to harass wildlife under the violation in my.
Even before that,
Yeah.
He didn't know the impact that dogs have on moose, right? So without him knowing that, he could have the dog on a leash and follow the moose. And it's no better than him having the dog off leash. If you have a dog and it's a good dog, but if you have a dog that you have control over, voice command, doesn't matter whether you have a leash or not, the dog's going to listen to you. The issue is the dog needed to be away and out of sight of the moose, because that was a bigger threat in that situation than him being out there. And, in that case, I needed him to listen to me. He wasn't listening to me. And then I had to forcefully communicate the significance of it and go from there. And that happens with people that are resistant and want to do it their own way. And I'm like, fine, that's fine. If we have the ordinances to support it, then I'm going to issue a summons based on what, we as a town have created to prevent any injury to the animal or to us.
I mean, I would advocate for being a wildlife protection ordinance, perhaps having different subsections with trash and harassment, especially having those fines for violations in there. I think is very important, especially for those, who aren't compliant after the first time. And I do like the verbiage in here that says failure to clear scattered trash within 24 hours is considered a violation. So it seems like you'll get a warning first. And if you don't clear the trash, then you'll be issued.
I always issue a warning first.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not here.
Yeah.
But if it's a consistent violation, then I stop issuing warnings. It's defined as a problem, as a violation already.
So, well, I will say too, that was part of our thought, kind of made up stuff, whatever, a little bit, but you do a warning and then kind of an escalating thing where if somebody's just completely ignoring it, you can have substantial penalties for the real problem.
And I'm fully for that.
Because I don't know that those exist currently.
It could easily be a situation where someone is seriously injured or killed by an animal.
Yeah.
And that could have happened, you know, I'm surprised that it didn't that night because it involved Cubs. So, and yeah,
Jim, I think you had your hand up for a sec.
Sorry. Do you have something, Jim?
Were you
Oh,
gonna-
I did. Thank you so much. Sorry. Um, sorry. Where in our code I have 7-3-50? Is that an active code? And if so, there is a dollar amount associated with that. I'm about this, and I do believe it's a two-parter. And I don't, if we have stuff on the books, I don't want to be redundant and just pass ordinance just to pass them. But if we have stuff on the books, I'd like to see them and see if we can just enforce them, or maybe they do need to be rewritten altogether. And I guess that's just a general question for everybody.
There is one on trash.
So 7-3-50 is the responsibility of owner for refuse on premise.
Perfect.
It
Yes.
should be the duty of every person, whether owner, leasing, or renter of any vacant lot, building, or premise, including any place of business, hotel, restaurant, dwelling house, apartment, or any other establishment at all times to maintain the premise in a clean and orderly condition, permitting no deposit or accumulation of refuse, garbage, trash, rubbish, or materials other than those ordinarily attended or attendant upon use for which premise are legally intended.
Now, the reason why I bring that up is because I think that's very well written. But if there can be, if we think we need to add more to that, then I think that's a good start. That verbiage,
Is there a
that verbiage on the books.
All of these are in our nuisance code, which does
Sorry.
associate with a penalty, but we don't put that typically in our ordinance. We typically have that as part of like a staged penalty. So we say there's a warning, there's this. After the warning, we have discretion to say, okay, you're up to $100, you're up to $300. We can't go past $300 per state statute unless we were home ruled, but for state statutes, we can go up to $300.
So I think like, if it's definitely easier to just like add to an existing ordinance, that we talked about this a lot last year in our meetings, that there's nothing about having it be bear safe or wildlife safe.
Correct. Which
Right,
is why I still believe this is a
Yeah,
two-parter with an additional third part, meaning that educational component. And
right.
I'm all about this discussion. But I strongly believe if there's verbiage already on the books, I'd like to look at that first before we just start rebuilding the wheel.
Yeah, and so, I mean, Gloria just read the refuse one, and I think that, yeah, to just go off that, I think though that there's almost no question that there has to be something about containers being bear safe, because you could have the ordinance that you can't have trash overflowing, but that if someone keeps having it overflow, but there's a way to stop that by having it be bear safe, because a lot of the times it's because the bear's getting into it because of a broken cable.
Absolutely.
etc. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I was gonna say another thing is having more trash pickups with some trash cans. By the end of a couple days, trash cans are overflowing and they can't get the lid shut down tight. That's another, so maybe an extra pickup or something.
Yeah, but in terms of the ordinance, I agree with you, Jim. But as stated, I think it makes sense to think about adding some specifics on wildlife and bears in particular, because from what I heard, if I have my trash can sitting out there and everything's in there and contained and not spilling over, I'm good. Till the bear comes along, dumps it all out, eats a bunch of stuff, and, so that part about the bear doesn't exist in that ordinance.
Well, I'm in total agreement. One of the situations, how it got to this point down at the depot, was that the dumpster was strapped over and the bear literally tipped it over so that it would spill forward and he was scooping it out. even with it strapped. So I think there's also an educational component on the owner of that receptacle to make sure that they're doing it correctly, and so that we can avoid some of these situations. But I totally agree with you, Wes. Totally agree with you.
Well, and some of these trash containers are not adequate. The lids are not secure. There are definitely better containment and secure containers that exist. The other issue that we had is out at the transfer station, they had plastic lids. Well, the bears ripped those out. Many a nights I went out and cleaned up the trash because the bear had gotten out and just pried the plastic doors off. They need to be metal. So some of this is a conversation with Bruin to update our trash containment systems.
My understanding, and I think you were at that meeting when the Bruin guy was there, was that, yes, that was their intention to have one with metal, whatever. And then for some reason, they delivered the wrong thing and it was here all summer and that's what happened.
Well, I don't want it there this summer if they can't bring the proper, we're just creating a problem for ourselves and we're attracting the bears.
So, but again, on the ordinance that, potentially rewording that or whatever, that if you do have trash receptacles sitting outside of a building or something like that, or some secured spot, I don't know, that they would need to be bear resistant. And in the wildlife coalition with like CPW, we're very careful to say bear resistant. Because as they've said, like in national parks, bears are smart. So bear proof, it's like, that's an unattainable standard. And that is something that the code enforcement or the sheriff's department hopefully look and say, well, damn, you did a lot here and somehow the bear got into it. I'm not going to fine you.
Right. If you have a container that you've identified the public is using as well, then I strongly recommend that you lock it. Combination lock that you notify Bruin Waste on the code so they know. I just make it the address of the building and they know how to unlock it. But having it a clip that anyone can use at the end of the week, it's overflowing, and overflowing is not an excuse for managing it. It can't be.
There is actually bear resistant products. And here's a whole list. Laura, I'm gonna give Gloria a copy of it, but
Okay.
it's got websites and everything for all the different things. And even, like Jim said, they dump the dumpsters and they just can scoop it out. Yeah, you dump that dumpster once, it just bends the lid. It's such flimsy metal.
Right.
I've picked up.
Or they can break the cables because the cables are super, and again, that's like a bigger issue.
So
I just think, sorry, Jim, you go.
No, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
My question was going to be, throughout this process, is there a program or some funds out there to assist homeowners and businesses with getting bear resistant trash receptacles?
So there's the CPW grant that was supposed to come out in February. We're not sure what is gonna happen with that.
Okay.
Yeah, so that is some funds. And we learned from Dana at our last meeting that is it the town crew that's retrofitting the town
Yes.
trash cans? So originally we were like, oh, we may have, if we get this grant, maybe we'll have to use part of that to retrofit the town trash cans that are, pretty easily able to get into, but they're gonna do that. So that's something that we don't need to spend any grant money if we get it on. But I think that I know that, well, not to make an overarching statement, because not everyone in Silverton, but I think that a good amount of people in Silverton keep their trash inside, like residential, inside till
Correct.
dump day, right? Like, I think a few people have accidentally put their trash outside, just in a trash bag, and then that, that gets it. But because we're not a town that has just like regular trash that's coming around to every house, I don't think it's like, if you have a trash bin outside, it needs to be bear proof, but there's not like yes, bear resistant. But you don't have to, because you can keep your trash inside. Obviously, if you're a business, like a restaurant, you're already paying for a dumpster that allegedly is bear resistant.
And that's gonna go to my additional point. These dumpsters, so for example, the 6-yard dumpster that's out back behind the building, it's technically a lease. And whether or not we can modify that dumpster is really up to the Brew and Waste. Are they on board with this? Have they been receptive to your communications?
Well, when he was I don't know, is he like the manager, the one who was there?
Yeah, so he's the owner.
Yeah, he was saying that all of them should be bear resistant. And at that meeting said that if we came across a broken one, like the cable is broken or dented, that they're supposed to be informed. However, then I think people weren't sure of whether to go directly to Bruin to say, oh, there's a can over here, or no, it's actually on the person leasing it to say, this broke, you have a lease agreement, this thing broke that you have said has to be, or that was promised to be bear resistant. I think they actually said all their products were, but I don't.
I will say that one of the bigger problems too for a lot of businesses, that if you have a dumpster at your business with a cable and, it's closed, so it's bear resistant, and then a local or a tourist comes by, undoes it, opens it up to throw their trash in and leaves it undone.
Yep.
And that's why there was discussion with, like Bevan said, of, maybe you certainly want to educate, but maybe even you have some of the regulations like, well, you got to have a lock on that or something, or I don't know.
No, I totally agree. And it was per our discussion down there at the depot, because we have a lot of campers that open up that trash receptacle and put all their stuff in there that is totally not train related. So per our conversation, I went down to the hardware store and I bought 4 locks and I locked it up. I gave a key to Brew and Waste. I put 2 keys in the depot and I kept one for myself. But you
The same thing
have to do
happens-
that.
The same thing happens at the old miners hospital. I look out my front window and that gets bears come over there at the time, but I also see people actually coming over there, going over and throwing their trash in that aren't. So it's like, yeah, it's widespread and it is an issue for business.
And that's why I recommend that we have them locked,
Yeah.
fortunately. And there are containers that have a better locking system. They have a bar that comes down over.
Yeah.
That would be preferable. The cable is good for birds and squirrels, but
Not
not really bears.
I wanted to ask one other question. And that is, to my knowledge, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I do agree with modifying the existing ordinance or looking into that. To my knowledge, there is no town ordinance regarding harassing and or intentionally feeding wildlife. And I want to leave birds out of that, but and like I said, CPW does have rules on harassing wildlife. But it's fairly weak and difficult to enforce. So then the question is, if it's the trustees here, is that something that is worth pursuing further in terms of that may need to be an additional part of that or some other ordinance or something? Is that worth looking into?
So we do just have one section in our code 78210, which is cruelty to animals. And so it's unlawful for a person to overdrive, overload, drive when overloaded, overwork, torture, deprive of necessary sustenance, cruelty, beat, mutilate, or kill needlessly, harass, or taunt in any way by any means to carry out transport in any vehicle or otherwise in a cruel and inhumane manner any animal or to cause any of these acts to be done.
I mean,
So be
I would
nice
add,
to your
You know,
mules.
it's like kinda.
I would like to add a harassment piece, especially also for like owners of animals who harass wildlife. I don't think that's in there either.
So, I mean, I guess I'm of the opinion of, I don't know if that, you try to modify that, it's kind of, I don't know, or something new, but in terms of harassing or allowing your dogs to go after and harass,
Oh, yeah.
or, and this definitely doesn't fall in that, is somebody who decides they're being good, like they're putting out food for the local fox or the, I mean, there was the case in Uray of the older woman who intentionally fed the bears, was warned, and they tried to get her to stop. She ignored it because she liked to see the bears come visit her house until one day, I don't remember what exactly went wrong, but she was killed by the bear. So obviously
Woman was.
the woman was, yes.
Yeah.
Because she insisted that she wanted to feed bears. So I think having wordage in an ordinance that, you know,
And there's cat food that gets put out that attracts bears as well. I mean, we're talking,
it's a little tricky
Yeah.
in some cases.
So I forget who took this part of the like wildlife, specifically harassing, killing, or injuring wildlife part, but it is pretty specific about dogs and or cat, like pets. I mean, you could add pet in there if, you know, other things, but I think dog and cat are the big ones. Um, yeah, I thought it said something also about feeding.
Where it says what, feeding wildlife is strictly prohibited.
Yeah,
Providing food for wildlife encourages animals to come into town where they figure they now have a reliable and easy main source of food.
oh, yeah, so like just having something, and I added that at the top, but it could be with the harassing, killing, injuring with your animal or with the like harassing of pets. I think
1 second, let me, because I saw that language in 1 second. Okay, so in the Vales ordinance, wildlife protection order, and I do like that, they said, no person shall intentionally or unintentionally feed or provide food in any manner to wildlife on public or private property within the town of Vale. A person will be considered to be in violation of this chapter if they leave or store any garbage, refuse, or attract it in a manner which would create or does create a lure of enticement for wildlife. So that's kind of
That's
under the
good.
refuge, like piece of that. But it's an overarching ordinance of a wildlife protection ordinance. I did like that piece.
So that part could be added to the trash
Well, if we decide to go that route.
if you wanted to.
So it sounds like maybe we could start with amending our current ordinances, if that would kind of appease the group and look into like which so far I have section 78210 and section 7350. On looking at kind of creating better language in those ordinances rather than creating a whole nother section of the code. Is that kind of what everyone's thinking?
That seems.
Jim?
Yeah, I'm all for it. But I certainly don't want to speak for everybody.
Carl?
Yeah, I think that's the right starting point. And again, I think this is a big issue and there's a lot of little things that we could dive into, but the really like high impact area, I think, is working on keeping trash secure. And we have an ordinance for that, but we need to make sure that it includes specific language about wildlife and wildlife resistant containers.
And like defining what wildlife resistant containers are, because in one person's eyes, a wildlife resistant container might be different than someone else's perception of a wildlife resistant container. Just having those definitions really clear.
Absolutely.
Right, and if it's broken, fixing it
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, so I'm okay with starting there, looking at our current refuge code.
I was gonna say also looking at section 7-8-350, running at large fines too. They have it, it's a violation of this section for any owner have dog or cat permitted such to run at large within the town, Hillside Cemetery, Kendall Mountain Rec Area, or Molis. And then they does give fines there. First offense, to $25, second within 12 months is 50, third offense within 12 months is 100. So
Maybe we could put offenses in our code.
The enforcement piece, I think, is just huge though, for everyone. Yes, Jim?
The enforcement part was what I was gonna make a comment on. I know that not all engagements with the public are nice. And trying to control myself. I don't want to put Bevan in a situation of where I almost cursed, guys. I don't want to put Bevan in a situation of where he's being placed against a combative individual, whether it's a animal, a dog on a leash, or trash receptacle issue. Do we have any verbiage in there that protects that person or that individual?
Right, I mean, you think too, though, if it's like you're in immediate danger, like they're not. Ideally, someone who like sees a dog off a leash and the dog is either like attacking another animal or a person or something like that, that they would call the sheriff's department.
I mean, the
Like, they'd
sheriff
call
obviously has-
911, right?
Right.
At some point, sheriff has to get involved, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have a concealed carry, but I'm not allowed to carry in the job. So I have a lot of experience with managing dangerous dogs, but when it involves wildlife and a dog, I'm not intervening there. Then it's really on the dog owner to manage that, and it's a CBW issue, and it's probably a sheriff's issue.
And my point of bringing that up is I just never want to put you, Bevan, or anyone in your position in a situation of where you're faced against a threatening individual.
I appreciate
And
that.
I know how people can get.
We do have a protocol for that. Bevan does bring a buddy. So he can call someone from the office and join him on like a code enforcement issue. So we do have protocols for that.
But thanks for your concern there, Jim.
I just want to comment too, because personal conversations with Sheriff Conrad and Abby, it's like they are both, very much they get very pissed off or whatever when people are harassing wildlife or doing things like that. They're very protective of that. So, if we have an ordinance or whatever on that, and it gets to the point where the sheriff's department gets involved, I'm pretty confident that in an egregious situation, they would be more than happy to respond and deal with things, because they don't have listened to.
Yeah, and I have a good relationship with him, and I have him on speed dial. So if in any situation I feel like I need that, I'll let the individual know that we're going to have additional company and to the party, and we'll go from there.
I think also just the piece of like clarifying what the reporting system is, because already even like in this group, I'm a little confused of, well, I mean, depending on the situation, I think I can gauge whether or not I'm going to call the sheriff's department or, you, but that like, okay, we want to be reporting bears and wildlife activity to CPW and also to you, or just like letting that system be very clear for people. So it's like, oh, well, I called so-and-so because I thought that that was going to be the better option. And for the trash, like, oh, I called the sheriff's department, but actually for trash, that's better to call you. And then if someone's like right then and there harassing wildlife, I think that's also, no, I'm probably going to call the sheriff's department first and then CPW. And then also you're going to know, but like for that immediate, like something's wrong. And also an animal could get killed right then and there, a person could get hurt right then and there, but just like having that be very clear of who do people call for, you know, it's like, here's the trash ordinance piece. How do you report that? And then the wildlife harassment or animal cruelty part, how do you report that? What's the process?
So
And
we
I think
don't
there'll
film
be
it and then put it up on YouTube? We don't do that?
Just, and I think there'll be like a difference between the ordinance and then the educational piece of the ordinance and blasting that out on who to appropriately call.
I wanted to suggest that since I had volunteered to work on some of the educational stuff, definitely want to kind of reach out and like Bevan and maybe Gloria or whatever, you know, in terms of that kind of reporting stuff and figure out how that should work.
Yeah.
What should we put on educational materials and things?
Yeah, I think at the wildlife meeting, I had requested that people certainly reach out to me and I can disseminate who needs to be contacted from there.
I mean, a lot of this stuff is going to be best served by reporting to that, texting to that number that you've set up.
Because then we have a track record of it.
Sure.
And then it's, you know, that's the whole reason we're setting up this text number, but I think we can work out those details. I do want to recognize our time is an hour in and wanted to get direction from the trustees if I could meet with the Wildlife Coalition or this group right here, the ordinance group of the Wildlife Coalition. I'm not sure how to say that, but to kind of go over some of these sections that we've identified and then come back to the group with more kind of solid recommendations on what we would like to amend in our current code. Would that work? Would that be the direction you all would want to give me?
That'd be great. And also like maybe getting Clayton involved too with like the exact verbiage.
Yeah. So if we could meet at some point in the next month before our next meeting and go over those sections, and then I would love to meet with you on the educational piece because we could definitely collaborate on that. Would that work for everyone? I don't want to cut the conversation short. I just wanted to recognize our time, and then sometimes we get into these details that hashed out outside of the meetings.
That's a great start, I think. Yeah.
Great.
I do want to just acknowledge that there are certain situations that need, like, I don't know how quickly the texting communication will get to me.
We are hoping within 12 hours, but lately the couple we've done has turned around in an hour, so.
Okay. But in a situation with an animal and some kind of interaction, I'd want a phone call on that.
Yeah, I think you and me and Wes can work on that kind of
Okay.
detail because I do really want that texting number to be the catch-all for all of our complaints.
Well,
So that we can have that transparency moving
that's
forward.
like
So let's,
you're not available 24/7. The sheriff's department is something serious enough.
let's definitely like sit
There's a,
kind of hash out those details on on where we're gonna go with each of those, because I do think it's worth really thinking through that before we start putting it out in public meetings on who to call and where to text and.
we don't know right now.
Right, I know. Not the details of that, but I do hear you on some more clarity of that, because
And that goes help with the,
instances, and that way we can respond faster.
right.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I know Wes doesn't like my idea of not being able to post online about saying there's a bear here to warn people, but it's like, that's a sticky situation. How do we go about that? And like, okay, there was one by the school where the kids were. Well, should we call the school, let them know, or should we tell Bevan? Or-
Right.
I called the sheriff, but
I also think sometimes with the posting in Facebook, it attracts people to.
Exactly.
That's it.
And they're like, oh, there's wildlife and there, that just makes it worse. Yeah.
That's the trade-off.
That's yeah, I know, that's the.
But that also goes in if you do have an ordinance, kind of the whole, sometimes when something happens and then there's nothing to back up any consequences for it.
Yeah.
Is like, if something's posted and it's like, oh, there's a bear here. Everyone goes over there, someone in that group starts getting close to it, has their dog. And then something bad happens and then it's like, well, sorry about it, you know, and so like, if there is that, it also might deter people from doing it. And if unfortunately it happens, at least there's some sort of like consequence or recourse.
And maybe
Exactly.
Bevan and I can ask other communities how they deal with it. What's their chain of command on if there's a wildlife sighting, and we can kind of get some ideas from there to bring to you all. But is this the group that I should reach out to for that meeting?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. I didn't know if we needed to add anyone else, but we'll just,
Work on this group for that meeting, and I'll reach out to you guys very soon.
Thank you for
For having us.
having us. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for like bringing this up.
Does everyone feel good about this as we leave today?
yeah,
Okay, good.
Although there's a lot of work to do, so.
yeah.
I do
And
appreciate.
I just want to like extend a sincere thanks for being so considerate and thoughtful and putting the energy that this takes into it. I think that's really, really, you know, something that might not be visible to everybody, but our community should know that there's a great group of people working on this.
Thanks.
I picked up many of dumpsters this summer.
Yeah.
Even the
Thanks, guys.
really big ones.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm writing a grant right now.
I think having the town trash cans, I'm not sure if like any of that. Like,
It will be.
yeah, like that, those,
So the corner trash cans.
Yeah.
And then they're gonna have a bear proof.
like that's huge, like that could,
Oh, it's tremendous.
you know. Cause those ones are the easiest and then they learn that. And then they're like, oh.
And if you secure, you can. It just takes a little more initiative on individuals to really secure the top of the lid down on the 3-yarder or the 6-yarder. So that the lids don't open.
Yeah.
But you like High Noon has had their container tossed multiple times.
Yep, I picked it up once.
So then you almost need those locked. We had ours tipped over. You almost need them secured to the ground. So I think this is an evolution. As long as the attempts are being made, I can see that.
Yeah.
You know, and then the communication is occurring. Thank you all.
So I have a question, Bevan, because that's a great comment. So then do we in the future look to individuals and businesses to erect some sort of concrete slab that these dumpsters can anchor to?
It's complicated because then it's a restriction on loading them into the trash truck. So I don't really know. I don't know if we could put a brake on them. I don't know.
I don't
But-
think they can work. They can just
Right.
I mean,
dump them
It's the
suckers.
issue of bear resistant because you can't actually make it fully bear proof, as it's been told to me. And so,
You know, one example of that concept, like taken to the kind of to the maximum, is what we have at the school. We have the dumpster inside kind of like a cage.
Yeah.
I don't think that's reasonable to expect most or really any businesses to do, but I think it's an example that there are engineering solutions to these problems.
Yeah, and you could have a slab with like a eye bolt sticking out, and you could run a little chain or cable to the wheel, so it couldn't really be moved, and it could be quickly, that could be a clip.
Mhm.
That wouldn't necessarily need a lock. That could just be a quick unclip so the guys could then roll it to the truck. And maybe that's the answer. It doesn't need concrete. You could secure that into the ground where you're placing. I don't want to overcomplicate it, but
Well, I
I-
just find it, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's,
All right.
I discussed.
I'll look at it. I'll see if I can find if anyone's had same issue. I'm sure they have. And what their solutions have been.
Cool.
Thanks.
Well, thanks, guys.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.
All right. Okay, the first agenda item that is now the last agenda item, is related to natural healing centers for psilocybin. And I started researching this a couple months ago, but I was only able to connect with Clayton yesterday on his opinion. So I apologize for the excess of information as it might not be needed. Clayton stated that these natural healing centers are more like doctor's offices than marijuana dispensaries. So all of the medicine is distributed at the time, like there's no one like purchasing the mushrooms and taking them home. Like it's all done at the actual center. And he suggested that we don't need to put any regulations in place unless we would really like to. So I attached a lot of information, but ultimately Clayton recommended not putting anything in place and relying on the state statutes.
I think for now, that makes sense, just because also we have to revamp our marijuana retail license and do a lot of other local ordinance work that maybe in the future we can look at this. In my opinion, I just think with prioritization, there's more things to tweak right now for.
I will say the marijuana code is probably the highest priority because we did take it out of our land use code. And so now it's not living anywhere at this point, and we need to put it back in to our business license code. So that is one area that we are working on right now. But yeah, any other thoughts from Jim or Carl on that?
I don't know much about mushrooms.
Sure.
Well, if you read my memo, you get to know a lot more about the healing centers.
I want to learn all about the healing centers. But no, in all sincerity, I don't have a lot to add to this right now.
Carl?
Yeah, I also don't have much to say other than that I'm really glad we're looking at other jurisdictions as a template or a guide. I think that there's no reason to go in any crazy direction with this.
Yeah, and sorry for all the excess of information there. I was really getting into it and then I talked to Clayton and he was like, actually, we don't need to do this. So I wanted to be fully transparent that our attorney recommended not putting anything in place since it is basically treated like a doctor's office.
All right. Well, it's definitely interesting and I'm happy there's other verbiage around Colorado and state.
And it is legalized now,
Yeah.
starting this year. And that was why I started researching it because of all the bills that were passed last year and what we needed to do as local governments.
Well, my mind was like, is there someone trying to come in to create this?
No, we haven't
center?
any. We haven't received any applications for a center yet.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, with that, I will reach out for another meeting in April with you all and hopefully have met with the Wildlife Coalition by then to go over our current ordinances and see where we could amend them to be more clear on harassment and trash. And potentially we'll look at the dog one as well. So.
Great. And then are we going to be looking in April as well at the marijuana retail?
Yes, so the first draft is due back. I'm having Clayton review everything right now. And he should be done with that by the end of this month. So hopefully we'll be able to review that.
And if he wants
as well.
Our local tobacco retail license is really great and detailed. You can
Yeah.
look at that as well while he's drafting, while you guys are looking to draft the marijuana one. I think there's some overlaying things that can
Great.
in both.
Yeah, and our current code was actually really out of compliance with current state statutes because it was written back in 2013 when it was legalized. So a lot has changed since then. We definitely needed to update it. This is just prompting us to do it a lot faster.
Great.
Oh, all right. Well, thank you all for your time tonight, and we'll see you Monday.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys. Stay warm.
Oh, thank you.
We need the snow. Bring it on.